2 hours and somehow remember literally everything, while the rest of us can spend an entire evening studying and still forget the chapter the second the exam begins? Because honestly, that used to be me. I would sit down with my coffee, my cute stationery, my color-coded notes, my 10-step productivity plan, and somehow still end up learning absolutely nothing. Half the time, I was just rewriting notes to feel productive, and the worst part is that it looks productive. Like, wow, look at me highlighting things in 6 different colors as if the fluorescent pink marker itself is going to pass my exam. Meanwhile, there's always that one student who studies quietly for less time than everyone else and still gets suspiciously high grades. And recently I started researching Chinese study methods because I kept seeing videos of students studying with terrifying levels of discipline. But the more I researched, the more I realized something important. Chinese students are not magically born smarter. Most of them just study in a completely different way from the average student. And honestly, some of their methods made me realize that a lot of us are accidentally studying in the least effective way possible. Chinese students focus heavily on active learning instead of passive learning, and passive learning is basically what most students do without realizing it. Rereading notes over and over, watching lectures while mentally planning their future wedding, highlighting entire paragraphs like every sentence is the chosen one. It feels productive because technically your eyes are looking at information, but your brain is not actually working hard enough to remember anything long term. They use active recall instead, which basically means forcing your brain to remember information before seeing the answer. So instead of rereading your biology chapter 5 times, hoping photosynthesis will spiritually enter your bloodstream, you close the notebook and test yourself first. For example, if you just finished studying the digestive system, instead of rereading the entire topic again, close the book and try explaining the whole process out loud from memory like you're teaching someone else. Then check what you missed afterward. And apparently, that struggle to remember something is exactly what strengthens memory. Which honestly feels rude because why does learning have to involve suffering? But it works so much better than passive rereading. Another thing I noticed is that these students almost never study vaguely. Most students sit down and say something like, "Today, I'm going to study chemistry." Okay, but what does that even mean? Your brain hears that and immediately wants to disappear into the forest forever. Chinese students usually study with extremely specific goals, not study math. More like solve 15 algebra questions and review yesterday's mistakes. Their study sessions are clear, measurable, and structured, which makes it easier for the brain to focus because there's an actual finish line. So instead of making giant, unrealistic to-do lists that make you panic emotionally, try planning your sessions like this. Revise Chapter 3 for 20 minutes, solve 10 questions, then test myself without notes. Suddenly, studying feels way less overwhelming because your brain actually knows what it's supposed to do. And honestly, this is also why I started using Thea Study, because it basically removes the most exhausting part of studying, which is figuring out how to study in the first place. And it's free to use. Chinese top students constantly test themselves instead of just rereading notes, and Thea's whole system is built around active learning. You can upload your lecture slides, notes, PDFs, textbooks, even YouTube videos, and it automatically turns them into quizzes, flashcards, study guides, and practice questions, which honestly saves so much time because making flashcards manually feels like a part-time job at this point. And the feature I genuinely liked most was Smart Study because it adapts based on what you keep getting wrong. So instead of wasting time reviewing chapters you already know, it focuses more on your weak areas automatically, which feels a lot smarter than my old study technique where I would revise my favorite easy chapter 17 times just because it made me feel intelligent. It also makes studying feel less boring because you're actively interacting with the material instead of just staring at your notes. So if you want to try it for free, I'll leave the link in the description. Another really interesting thing Chinese students do is reviewing information before they completely forget it. This is called spaced repetition, which sounds complicated and scientific, but it's actually really simple. Instead of revising something once and never touching it again, they review it in small amounts over time. So maybe you learn a topic today, review it quickly tomorrow for 10 minutes, test yourself again a few days later, and then do another review next week. And apparently this helps move information into long-term memory, which honestly explains why some students look weirdly calm during exams while the rest of us are fighting for survival internally. Their brains are seeing familiar information instead of trying to remember something for the first time under pressure. If you're loving the video so far, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more study tips and hacks. And can we please talk about mistake notebooks, because this might genuinely be one of the smartest study habits ever. Most students get questions wrong and immediately pretend the mistake never happened for emotional protection. Chinese students do the exact opposite. A lot of them actually keep track of their mistakes in one notebook. They write down the question, why they got it wrong, and the correct method, which sounds simple, but it's incredibly effective because improvement usually comes more from fixing weaknesses than repeatedly revising things you already know. So if you constantly make silly mistakes in math or forget certain formulas in physics instead of getting annoyed and moving on, write them down somewhere. Then review only your mistakes once a week. You'll start noticing patterns really quickly. Maybe you rush calculations when nervous, maybe you always misunderstand one type of question. That awareness alone can improve your grades way faster than just studying harder. Most of us are not actually studying when we say we're studying. We're studying, checking notifications, replying to texts, opening TikTok for 1 second, reorganizing our desk, drinking coffee, and having a minor existential crisis simultaneously. Meanwhile, Chinese students often study in focused blocks. And apparently, even 30 minutes of deep focus is more effective than 3 distracted hours, which honestly explains so much. So one really simple thing you can try is putting your phone in another room for just 30 minutes and focusing on one clear task only. Not beside you, not face down, not just for calculator purposes. Another room. Because your brain genuinely cannot focus deeply if it keeps expecting dopamine every 8 seconds from notifications. But honestly, I think the biggest thing I learned from researching Chinese study methods is that intelligence is probably way less fixed than people think it is. A lot of students genuinely believe they're just bad at studying, when in reality, nobody ever taught them how to learn properly. If your study methods are ineffective, of course studying feels exhausting. Of course you feel behind all the time. But once you stop relying completely on motivation, once you switch from passive studying to active learning, once you build systems instead of waiting to magically become disciplined overnight, studying genuinely becomes easier. Not easy, but easier. And honestly, Chinese students are not successful because they're emotionless academic robots who haven't experienced happiness since middle school. They're successful because they built routines strong enough to work even on bad days. And that's something literally anyone can learn. So if you made it till the end, comment, study smarter, not harder, so I know the real ones stayed till the end.